Hi chat, I'm actually preparing this video for you so you know what to do in that part just before you let the students do the writing drill for the very first time in letter writing. So you let first one of the students read the task in that page of the book at the bottom of that page where it says tone of the letter. That's drill number 3, that drill regarding something that they have lost. Now, once the student finishes reading the text there, you now ask the class to take a look at the board because you have to do some board work here as a way of preparing them in their writing activities. So you ask them the question whether the person that we're supposed to write to here is somebody that we would know. Now, since this is for a newspaper, it's likely that's not going to be the case. Therefore, the best way to start a letter in which they do not know who the reader will be is to begin with the words "Dear Sir" slash "Madam." Now, typically, that particular line is provided in the task, but for this particular example, we just want them to be able to think what the possibility is. Now, as a rule, if they are writing to someone that they don't know of, just like in this case, dear sir slash madam, the way to end is to use the words yours faithfully, and they always have to end with their full name. So, for example, the writer here is Clark Kent. We always leave a space between the yours faithfully part and the Clark Kent, the name I mean part. So, just also emphasize that. Now, direct your attention to the middle part here because previously you have shown to them the 4 paragraph outline. So you might now want to ask them, how now do we apply the 4 paragraph outline here? So paragraph 1. Paragraph 1 is the introduction. An introduction will always have 2 parts. There's always a part in which the writer introduces himself, and the second part is where he or she presents the purpose of writing. So, in the context of the situation here about somebody writing the newspaper, a logical way of introducing would be perhaps to mention that the writer is a local, or probably he or she is a reader of the newspaper. This is something that you can ask the students. Maybe you can ask them, chat the question, what kind of information would you like to put as a way to introduce yourself? Some students would raise these ideas, just confirm them. You volunteer if in case they don't get it. And when you do share, almost always they get it automatically. So that's the first half of the introduction. Now you can direct them to the sample again that's in the previous pages. Direct them to the sample introduction there, so they know what it means. In an example, it was written that the writer is a sophomore student, so it's that way in which the writer introduces himself. So in the same manner, he shares something relevant about himself, so therefore this particular line need not be their name or any other personal information, but just something that will attract the attention of the reader, because apparently by so doing, it means that it's a letter from a reader. Now, the purpose part, the second half meaning, is of course the sentence in which they should be writing the purpose. Now, you might want to ask again the class for this one chat. Ask them, what do you think is the purpose of the writer here? Essentially, what the purpose really is to ask for some information about the lost item to be published. Now, in the past, many students would say that to ask the help of the newspaper. You make a follow-through, you might ask, what kind of help are we asking the newspaper? Until you arrived at this particular idea. So you just basically lead the class so that they get the right idea. So that's the first paragraph. And again, you can direct them to the sample in the previous pages about that canteen, the cafeteria example, so that they know what to do in the first paragraph. Now, paragraph 2. Okay, so in this case, we talk about the background of the issue. In this case, the issue is a lost item. So in this case, you guide them that, okay, in this particular paragraph, what we should be doing is, of course, mention what the lost item is and naturally describe it because that's one of the requirements in the task to describe the lost item. Uh, you might want to mention how it was lost or where it was lost. You might want to add here, chat, that in many instances they have to volunteer information because if they just limit the answers based on what is provided in the task, oftentimes it may be too short. Therefore, I'd recommend that maybe they create sort of like a story that would help highlight how actually the item was lost. So that's over here. Now, you can ask them, you can engage in a discussion with them, right? What examples of lost items perhaps they would want to use here. So solicit ideas from the class. You can comment whether they can be a good way to build a story on. In the past, many students would talk about, say, a lost wallet, a lost bag with some presents or documents. It could be a lost dog, probably an animal. But in this case, it should be an item, so it should be a thing. Because in the past, somebody did ask whether they can use a dog, although dog is an it. But in this case, it's an item we're discussing, so it's an object, it's a physical, inanimate thing. So you might want to ask them to think about other stuff instead. So um, tell them that this paragraph should be no more than 4 sentences. So about one sentence for the item, another two for how it was lost, and another one perhaps to where it was lost. So you can just guide them. And again, for that, direct them to the sample about the cafeteria issue so they would know what to put in paragraph 2. Now, the third paragraph is about the course of action all the time. So in this case, the course of action is the request. So therefore, they naturally have to write a sentence that actually asks the reader to post the information about the lost item. And from there, they have to explain why it's important so that they can show to the reader that they really have to have that item back. However, as a way to express that request, you might also want to write some suggested expressions so they would know how to start their sentence. So you can start by writing, "May I ask you to?" and then they just complete the sentence from there. So the ellipsis dot 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 is there. Or you can add this, "I would greatly appreciate it if," or "it would definitely be helpful if," or "I would like to ask or request you to do something for me." Now, if you have more expressions in your mind, chat, then just please add to this list here. You might also want to solicit ideas also from the class. Try to make it more very interactive so they can also participate, feel like they have contributed something. So what that's one of the things you can do also in this discussion. Now, once you have finalized this third part, emphasize that at this point everything is covered already, but there's still one more paragraph in which the writer found words. So in this example, what they can do is to just thank the reader for taking the time to read the letter, and also it is in this paragraph where they can express their hope for something. Like something like, "I hope that you grant my request," or "I look forward to your positive response to this request." So you can again write these expressions so that they can just copy them and use them if they wish in their letter writing activity thereafter. Now, you might also want to add something here in this paragraph 4 because typically when you are requesting for something, or especially if you are expecting some feedback, like in this case, the feedback will come from the readers themselves responding to the ad or to the information that was published. You might want to leave some contact details. So you can ask them to leave some contact details so that people who might have seen the item could contact them. So besides thanking the reader, hoping for something, they can also add their contact details. Just their number will do, not their home addresses, for security reasons. So that's how it's going to be like. Now, this particular discussion part chat will last for about 15 to 20 minutes maximum. You will find this will be a very engaging part of your class, because this is the part where you get ideas from them, you share ideas also, you give them suggested expressions like the ones in blue over here. So try to make this a very interactive part, and then afterwards you give them pieces of paper. Just ask June for that. You can ask this prior to the activity so that you can uh, give this straight to them after you're done with the discussion. And then a very important thing in the writing activity chat is that you move around and check your work. That's very important because they need some feedback while they're doing something. Now, in the past, most students would have some issues about paragraphing. So try to ensure that when they write their paragraphs, there are always spaces between them. And that is because when we want them to write letters, even essays, they always have to be in a so-called block format, in which the paragraphs are all aligned towards the left margin. There are no indentations in the first line of each paragraph, but rather to demarcate the paragraphs, we leave spaces in between them. You might find that same pattern that I used in all of the samples found in the letter writing section of the book. So if you take a look at those samples, you can do that. You can even share this with them even before they start writing, so that they would know how to do it eventually. Um, Comment on, of course, their grammar, their construction, their word use. Make recommendations if you have to. This is also your way, Cha, because this is the very first writing activity they're doing. This will also be your opportunity to be able to get a good idea about the level of skill in writing that your students have. And that's what I always do with my students in the past, so that I can more or less gauge at the beginning of the session which ones would have or would need some more help, and the ones that won't. So take this 30 minutes, of moving around. You don't always have to do it at the get-go. Maybe after about 15 minutes, you can check the work, because typically this is just 20 minutes, but we give them the full 30, so they can take their time and feel good about their work. Now, after 30 minutes, you get the paper, you check them. If you wish, you can communicate with me and show to me their work after your class. You can give your feedback the day after if you wish, or right after you're done, because we have a 4-hour difference, so you can just take a photo using your Viber or your Messenger and just send the work to me so I can see how it's like. It will also be my way of knowing whether the input was done well. So I hope that this helps, Cha. And if you have any questions, just get back to me, and I'll be more than glad to help or assist you. Okay? Bye.